Graduates, the story of you starts today. And there are, honest to God, no limits to what you can become, but with one caveat. You have to do it with your strengths. Now, you might be looking at me saying, gee, John, well, that seems pretty obvious. Well, if it is obvious, then why is it that no one does it? When Gallup asks people all over the world, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? 70% of people tell us no. Why is that happening? I think it's happening for one reason. Because people are trying to fix what's wrong with them and not working on what's right with them. And I'll give you an example. One of the most famous names ever in advertising is a guy by the name of Roy Spence. In fact, there's one organization that said that Roy Spence is the ad man of the century. So you could argue that Roy is the best at what he does. But there was one time in Roy's life when he was almost thrown off track because he wasn't focusing on his strengths and he was focusing on his weaknesses. It started in grade school in Texas. Roy was given a writing assignment by one of his teachers, and Roy loved to write. So Roy took the assignment home, worked on it as hard as he could. He brought the paper back, gave it to his teacher. His teacher reviewed it. She gave him an A. So Roy came home to his mom and gave it to her, and he said, Mom, I got an A in my writing assignment. His mom said back to him, Roy, you can write. Well, in his next year, Roy had almost exactly the same writing assignment, but by a different teacher. This time, he worked really hard on it, handed it in to his teacher, but something different happened. Because when he got the paper back, the paper had red circles all over it. And in bright red lettering was a D. Roy almost failed. Roy took the paper back to his home, gave it to his mom, and he said, Mom, I can't write. The mom was puzzled, so she looked at both papers, studied them, came to a conclusion. She said, No, Roy, you're a fantastic writer. You can't spell. But what a pivotal moment in Roy's life, because someone told him he couldn't do what he's great at. But the point is we need to be like Roy, and we need to identify our strengths. We need to develop our strengths. We need to use our strengths, and then we need to master them. Because if we do, we'll change the world. But if we work on what's wrong with us, we'll miss our opportunity to change the world. Reminds me of the last story that Mark Twain published before his death. The story's about a guy who studied history in the military. And the guy wanted the answer to one question. Who is it that's the greatest general of all time? He studied Alexander the Great. He studied Caesar. He studied General Patton. He studied John J. Pershing. But he could never quite come to a definitive conclusion as to who is it, the greatest general of all time. So he died, and he went to heaven. And waiting for him at the pearly gates of heaven was St. Peter. That was his moment to get the answer to the question that he'd wondered about his entire life. He looked at St. Peter and he said, St. Peter, I have to know, who is it that's the greatest general of all time? St. Peter smiled at him and he said, well, it's that gentleman right there. The man looked back at him and said, that's impossible. It can't be him, for I know that man. That man is a shoe cobbler from my hometown. He was never a general. St. Peter looked back at him and he said, I know. But had he been a general, he would have been the greatest general there ever was. But that's what we need to keep in mind is our strengths. Because if we don't identify them, use them, develop them, and then master them, we're going to miss our opportunity to change the world. So graduates, as you go on today, keep your strengths in mind and soar with your strengths. So congratulations, and thank you for letting me be here with you today.